Okay, it looks like we are recording. And then I'm also gonna see if we can allow captions for folks. Okay, so we've got closed captioning allowed for this meeting as well, because we want to make this as accessible as possible. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Christina Snyder-Ashtari. I am Michaela Kauna and Makamo and a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians. I also serve as the Governor's Tribal Affairs Secretary and his tribal advisor. And in that capacity, I staff the Tribal Nation Grant Fund panel. The panel is a 9-member panel of tribal leaders who direct the Tribal Nation Grant Fund, which we're all aware of, and are hoping to learn a little bit more about the Impact Fund today. So in that capacity, I am going to walk you through the TNGF Impact Grant. The Tribal Nation Grant Fund panel is not on today because of quorum issues. So we wanted to make sure that they did not violate some of our state laws regarding Bagley-Keene and quorum and open meeting laws. But they are available as resources outside of this as well if there's any questions that you have about just generally the program itself. Today I also have Loretta Miranda's on, my deputy, she's on cam, and then we've also got Erica Dennis, who is off cam because she's got some internet issues, but she is also a huge piece of this program and is going to be your best resource as you navigate some of your questions moving forward. So today what we're gonna go through is basically everything that we have out there about the impact grant. There's gonna be some outstanding questions, and that's why we've created such a long application period, is so that you can get as much technical assistance as you need to be able to be successful in applying for the grant. That said, staff cannot assist you with your application in terms of making it better or making it a project that well, we can help you with what the panel might be thinking about, but we can't actually staff your application. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and walk through a few things so that you can see where to find them. And this might be a little bit unwieldy, but we'll just figure it out as we go. Okay. So can you see that okay? This should be the Tribal Nation Grant Fund landing page.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So everything you need to be able to access this grant is available if you go to the tngf.ca.gov page. And where you'll go is a couple of different spots. And so I will walk you through all of that as well. It looks like 15 applicants have already started the application, so good job on that. But if you're looking for the grant, you'll want to click on grants, and that'll take you to active grants. You'll click on impact grant, and that'll show you kind of all the resources that you need. And you probably know that because you joined this Zoom meeting right here. But you will click here to apply, and then you'll see the full grant guidelines here. This link will take you to the full written guidelines. That's what we're going to go through today, and we're going to answer your questions as we go through them. We're also going to go through a full the application form in case there's anything that is unclear on that as well. Because if there's anything that's unclear, we can also make a few adjustments to the application form to make it clearer for your use. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing our presentation. And can you see that, Loretta?
Yep, we can see it. It's not in slide view yet, but we can see it.
Yeah, great. Okay. Can you see the right view?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, the Tribal Nation Grant Fund Impact Grant. The purpose of the or the TNGF Impact Grant was created to fulfill the goals of the Tribal Nation Grant Fund as initially conceived, as a flexible funding opportunity for smaller tribes to achieve self-determination through economic diversification. The TNGF Impact Grant seeks to fully fund innovative, sustainable projects aimed at creating self-sustaining economic and community development for applicant tribes. There's approximately $42 million in the Tribal Nation Grant Fund funds available in 2025 for the TNGF Impact Grant. Applicants may apply for awards ranging from $1 million to $3 million. Note that originally the panel had considered applications in excess of that, but because this is the first round and we understand that there were going to be several applicants and there's only the $42 million available currently, they wanted to make sure that as many funds could go out to as many projects as possible. But I think in your application, noting whether there is need for more is also helpful, just for, I think they want to fully fund your whole project, which we'll talk about in a minute, but noting at some point in the process whether there's greater need, would it be helpful for them to kind of understand how to shape future funding. The panel right now is currently viewing this impact grant as a little bit of a working pilot. And so if there's anything that is working or not working for you, please let us know, because the panel is going to use that information for future funding rounds. The following tribes are eligible to apply for TNGF impact grants. Non-gaming tribes, which under the compacts are defined as federally recognized tribes in California with or without a tribal state class 3 gaming compact or secretarial procedures that, as of the date of the last distribution to such tribe from the Revenue Sharing Trust Fund and during the immediately preceding 365 days, has not engaged in or offered Class 2 gaming or Class 3 gaming in any location, whether within or without California. And limited gaming tribes, federally recognized tribes in California that as of the date of the last distribution to such tribe from the Revenue Sharing Trust Fund and during the immediately preceding 365 days, either has a Class 3 gaming compact with the state or secretarial procedures, but is operating and has operated fewer than a combined total of 350 gaming devices in all of its gaming facilities or other facilities wherever located, or does not have a Class 3 gaming compact or secretarial procedures, but is engaged in Class 2 gaming, whether within or without California. I think you're all aware of all of this, so we don't need to define some of these things, but gaming devices and gaming facilities are all defined within the compacts as well, if there's any question on that. In addition, an applicant must demonstrate compliance with the Tribal Nation Grant Fund's reporting requirements, and 2, be in receipt of clean audits of grants awarded under this grant fund where applicable. To our knowledge, which I think is the world we're working in, there's no one currently under audit under the grant fund, so that should not necessarily be a problem in this for eligibility during this round. But in terms of compliance with reporting requirements, that's a requirement pretty much for all of the grants in the grant fund. And it's really, if Erica has been trying to reach your tribe to get updated reporting, that needs to be in compliance by the secondary due date, which we'll talk about in a moment. The panel will accept but not process applications from eligible tribes with outstanding grants under panel consideration for potential noncompliance until the panel determines that either the outstanding grant is complete and no further action is required, or the outstanding grant will undergo an audit pursuant to the TNGF audit process. All eligible tribes are encouraged to apply. However, the panel will not consider applications from tribes that cannot demonstrate compliance by Friday, July 18th, 2025, the secondary due date as identified above. And we'll edit that because it looks like I've got a typo before it gets posted. So there's been some questions on this. I've heard from staff that if tribes have multiple open applications, even if they're in compliance? Will this be problematic or make them less competitive? We'll talk about this in a little bit in terms of the metrics and rubrics that the panel is going to be using to make sure that they can kind of weigh different applications, because given the relatively limited funding and the relative number of tribes who are likely interested in the funding, they're going to need to be able to make decisions in a way that is fair. But from what I can tell from the panel is that open grants in the TNGF won't be used against you, and it won't make you less competitive unless you are unable as a tribe to demonstrate a record of being able to complete projects to completion. And so if you have other examples outside of the Tribal Nation Grant Fund where you have completed projects, applied for grants, done the project, and you can demonstrate that, that will be really helpful as one of the metrics. It's not the only metric, so I think if that's not something that you can demonstrate, and you have several open grants, that may be problematic, but it's weighed against a couple other different things, and we'll go through those in a moment. Okay, so the TNGF Impact Grant prohibits per capita distributions to tribal members. That is both in the compacts and statute. Investments in a purpose or project related to any gaming operation or activity. In general, this includes purposes that facilitate the operation of or projects that physically house gaming devices, defined as any slot machine within the meaning of Article 4, Section 19, Subdivision F of the California Constitution. General welfare distributions to individual tribal members. Programs that absent continued or additional grant funding would not be sustainable and where no future funding is available at this time. So for example, if you are seeking to create I don't know what a good example would be, to be honest, but let's say that you are seeking to create a healthcare facility and you haven't secured future funding, and there isn't a relatively stable funding source identified that you would be eligible to be able to take advantage of in the future. That would be excluded because the whole idea here is that you've got a plan for something that's going to be sustainable in the future. That is to say, I know there's probably some questions going off right now. That is to say that the relatively challenging field that we're in with the federal administration and not quite knowing where funding is or is not, I think will not be used against you if there are things that historically have been stable funding sources from the federal government that you've identified as being something that could sustain that program in the future. I think, though, that if it's a program that was created relatively recently, as in kind of the last administration, and was not something that was ongoing prior to that, then I would say that might not be a suitable future funding source, given kind of what the political environment is right now. And then projects that absent additional funding are not feasible and where no additional funding has been secured at the time of application. And so while the panel does encourage leverage funding sources, understanding that 1 to 3 million is really not that much in the context of fully funding an entire project. If there is no additional funding and you're kind of hedging your bets against getting this funding to leverage other funding, that is probably going to be excluded from being a funding source, just given that there will likely be so many tribes competing. And really the idea that the panel wants to kind of put out there is that they want to be funding projects that have a relatively high chance of success, so that you don't have a tribe that's binding funding without a guarantee that it will be able to do the project. That is to say too, though, that if you are applying for this funding as a leveraged funding source for capital that you'll be securing from a bank, for example, we know that some tribes, because you cannot use your lands as security, Sometimes we'll put like $1 million surety in the bank to loan against like a $10 million loan. Where you can demonstrate all of that and that that's actually going to happen and it's going to facilitate a future project that will happen like basically upon getting this funding, that I think would be not excluded under this grant fund. And then I can't see the chat, so I'm not answering questions in real time, but after I close this presentation, I can come back to questions as well, or we can wait till the end to answer questions because we may answer them in the process. So the timeline, applications opened and you should have had access to the SurveyMonkey starting Friday, April 18th, 2025. So you can begin to submit your applications in SurveyMonkey via email or regular mail to the Tribal Nation Grant Fund program on that date. Technical assistance will also be made available on that date. So you should be able to reach out to Erica, and I've heard that several of you have already, just to make sure that you're doing everything right. Today, we're having our informational webinar, and you can ask questions and receive broad technical assistance today. But you can also ask questions at any time before the final deadline as well. Applications are due on Friday, June 20th, 2025 at 11:59 Pacific time, PM. Electronic submissions must be time-stamped and regular mail submissions must be postmarked to reflect timely submission. Applicants should indicate whether technical expert review may be required for their application. Technical assistance will be available until 5 p.m. Pacific time on this date. There is a secondary due date, and that doesn't mean that you have an extended time to apply. It means that if you submitted your full application on the first due date, June 20th, and there was some outstanding documents that still needed to get done. Like, for example, let's say that you're kind of still pulling together the budget, but it's almost final, and it's basically you're relying on an outside third party to submit that. It's not, don't get all this stuff in, it's get as much stuff as you can get in by the initial due date. If you are waiting on estimates from third parties or your authorizing resolutions don't look quite right, our staff will be reaching out and making sure that you have all of that submitted. So you have 30 days after the initial due date to get all of the things that are outstanding in. Again, everything should be in by the first due date, and this second due date is just for us to make sure that your applications are complete. So if there's anything that we note as missing, all of it needs to be in by July 18th. Many of you who've been engaging with this program already have seen that the panel will sometimes fund things on, contingent on receiving additional materials. That's not something that they're going to be doing with this grant, just because, again, of the relatively few dollars and the number of tribes who are probably seeking those dollars. And so this is the basically the time where you will be able to cure anything that would prevent the panel from considering your application in full. Again, all outstanding documents not already submitted with the application, including authorizing resolutions, studies, budgets, and other supporting materials, must be uploaded in SurveyMonkey or submitted via electronic or regular mail to the Tribal Nation Grant Fund program by 11:59 p.m. on that date. Electronic submissions must be time-stamped and regular mail submissions must be postmarked to reflect timely submission. All documents and authorizations for outstanding grants to demonstrate compliance with the Tribal Nation Grant Fund program must be uploaded in SurveyMonkey or submitted via electronic mail or regular mail to the Tribal Nation Grant Fund by 11:59 Pacific time on this date. Electronic submissions must be time-stamped and regular mail submissions must be postmarked to reflect timely submission. So this is if you've got anything outstanding, like you are still kind of waiting on closing out some grants or on reporting some of your grants, all of that needs to be done by the secondary due date. Okay, applications that remain incomplete or those submitted by applicants who have not demonstrated compliance with the Tribal Nation Grant Fund program by this due date will not be considered by the panel. They'll begin their initial review, and the Tribal Advisor and Commission will secure technical experts as deemed necessary at this time. And so if you have a project where someone of average capacity and intelligence would not be able to understand its feasibility with the documents you've submitted. Like, let's say that you have something that's highly technical or scientific. We encourage you to identify that you will need an expert in your application, and we'll show you where that is, and what field that expert should be from. We will likely not be using the tribe's expert. We would like to have a third-party expert, but it's someone who can assess your application and its feasibility from the perspective of their expertise. So again, you know, if you've got an aquaculture project, please flag that it would be helpful to have someone from that field to be able to assess the feasibility of your project. And then starting August 15th, the Tribal Nation Grant Fund will consider funding recommendations, and if approved, those awards will start going out. Again, funds don't get awarded, or they don't come to your tribe on August 15th. If they're approved, there's a lag time of about a month that it'll take to get you that check. But you should know starting August 15th whether those applications are approved. Funding criteria. So these are the things that the panel is going to be weighing once they see that you kind of fit the minimum requirements. The minimum requirements are basically the normal Tribal Nation Grant Fund application. And then on top of it, the panel will weigh the merits of applications using the following criteria. Justification, and again, it's on a 1 to 3 point scale. The proposed project should address a specific need of the tribal or target community. The explanation of need should include enough detail for the panel to understand the circumstances of the tribal or target community, and the applicant should supply supporting data or documentation if possible, or if available. The project as proposed should explain how it addresses or produces positive outcomes relative to the need of the tribal or target community. Relationship to strategic vision or community goals. The proposed project's outcomes or activities should closely align with both the tribe's vision and the goals for the greater tribal community. This can be demonstrated through supporting documentation, such as a strategic plan or supporting tribal resolutions. Feasibility. The project application should demonstrate that identified personnel, project activity timeline, and budget and expenditures align closely with the project description and anticipated outcomes. Innovation. Proposed projects are encouraged to implement new insights or ideas for the tribe or larger tribal community with potential benefits of change made clear. Efficiency of approach. Plans for proposed projects should leverage or contribute to existing infrastructure or precedents in the tribal or greater community. Applicants should provide a clear picture of how data will be collected and used to demonstrate the degree to which outcomes are met and at which points in the proposed project. So again, with the metrics, it should be a fully tribally driven project. And so I think clearly identifying how you're going to measure success is going to be helpful for the panel to understand basically, you know, how is this, you know, benefiting your community? It's not kind of from their perspective, how is it benefiting your community? I think it's more, you know, how are you going to, what is your idea of success and how are you going to measure that? The panel strongly encourages applicants to provide supporting documentation for each of the above criterion, including reports, strategic plans, studies, and other relevant materials for their review. All applicants should identify whether their applications may require technical expert review and which area of expertise would be appropriate. So the panel, upon recommendation of an applicant or at its discretion, may consider the input of individuals who can lend expertise to the review process for applications that require technical expertise, methodologies, or specialist knowledge. The tribal advisor and commission will gather recommendations and select appropriate experts in those cases in which it is deemed necessary. The panel is not required to seek technical expert review if the application is in its entirety is within their ability to evaluate. So again, we don't encourage you to suggest technical expert review if actually it's like within the application, it's pretty straightforward, and that, you know, a tribal leader could take a look at it and understand its merits on its face. But again, if there is a specialist type of or a specialist needed to evaluate whether it's feasible, like for example, if you're seeking to do some sort of wastewater treatment plant, for example, the panel probably isn't going to understand how all of that works, and we're certainly not going to understand that. So I think just letting us know that that someone within that field would be ideal. That would be helpful for us to be able to provide the panel with everything it needs to fairly score your application. Technical experts, once secured, should make every effort to evaluate statements of fact made by the applicant and assess the overall value, need, feasibility, sustainability, and justification of the proposed project to the tribal or target community. Technical experts will be compensated $100 for each day spent reviewing and scoring applications. The performance period shall be identified in the application, and it should not exceed a term of 3 years. And I have another typo, so we'll update that. A term of 3 years, excluding extensions duly considered and granted by the panel based on extenuating circumstances. So you have up to 3 years. The idea is to keep these projects and funding moving. The panel is a panel of tribal leaders and understands that sometimes timelines get sidelined because of things like global pandemics or trade wars. And so, you know, the expectation is that these projects should be kind of hitting the ground running immediately. And that if it takes longer than 3 years, then there should be some justification for that. But there is also reporting requirements. And so just given that this is the first time that this grant is going to be moving, reporting is required every 6 months until project completion on expenditures of awarded funds. The reporting requirements are not going to be overly burdensome. They'll be similar to what you already do with other grants within the TNGF. But they should identify how the funds have been used, including identifying each project or activity undertaken, the amount of TNGF impact funding expended by the project or activity, including amount budgeted versus actual expenditures, and a description of each project or activity completed. It shall also identify the specific outcomes achieved by each project or activity, including whether the project or activity was completed. And really, this is just, again, you are all part of kind of this initial piloting phase of this impact grant. And so it's helpful to the panel to get more data as opposed to less, to just understand whether the timelines are appropriate, whether whether this is actually working the way that they're envisioning it, or whether some adjustments should be made in the future to make it less burdensome or to make it more feasible to be able to do these projects. Questions concerning the TNGF impact grant, the application process, or programmatic issues must be submitted in writing in email to tribalconsultation@tngf.ca.gov. Those will go to Erica. Tribal Nation Grant Fund program staff cannot assist applicants with the actual preparation of your proposals. They can only respond to technical questions about the application during the period of time between publication date and due date. They will also be engaging with you after the first due date, just in case there's anything that you need to cure. So with that, we're going to go through the actual application so that you can see what's all needed ahead of time, so that in that second application period, you're not getting a lot of folks reaching out asking you for some amendments to the things that you have submitted. So I'm going to stop share for a moment. And it looks like there's a couple things in the chat, so I want to make sure I'm addressing them. Okay. So for some reason, I had been under the impression that this grant was targeted to economic development projects. Will infrastructure, housing, or other non-economic development projects be competitive? Yes. And so really, this grant is not for necessarily just economic development. Again, the idea is that it's for kind of all the things that are under the compacts and the statute as being things that are aligned with the TNGF. So those projects can be competitive as long as you're demonstrating sustainability and impact to the community. So for example, if it's like a tribal court system, that is something that could be competitive as long as you are looking at it as kind of holistically, how are we going to sustain this and how is it going to be built? So if you've got, let's say, you know, a major strategic plan and you've got feasibility and environmental studies already for major infrastructure upgrades reservation wide that are going to basically create some sort of net benefit for the community, that could be competitive. Is this intended to be an annual recurring program? So that is subject to future funding availability. Some of you may be tracking that there are potentially some updates to the TNGF that are going through the legislative process. Those could impact the feasibility of this in future, or at least the timing of this in future. So for right now, this is a one-time thing, but it's also it is intended to be something that's available in the future, but it will be subject to funding availability. Land purchase is an acceptable use. That we have gotten some tribal consultation feedback that land purchase where it's outside of a tribe's ancestral lands should be prohibited, or that land purchase should be prohibited completely. However, just given the goals of the program, the panel has not acted on that. So I think tribes should use their discretion and best practices when it comes to land. And I think some of the things that we talked about with the panel were, you know, if a tribe wanted to purchase land or housing in a place where they had a high concentration of members, but it potentially was outside of their ancestral territory, I think, you know, that's not necessary. Like if you had a community hub in an urban area, that would not necessarily be offensive to the, you know, the goals of the panel, or I think California Indian country, but I think there is a lot of concern about tribes seeking to place lands into trust that are outside of their ancestral territory. So I would be mindful of that because it is something that the panel is aware of and mindful of at this time. We did not say how many awards roughly will be awarded from the 42 million, but it will actually just depend on the funds being sought. If everybody applies for 3 million. I'm going to do some math right now, which I did earlier, but I did not do today. Then that's as many as 14 tribes could be awarded the full 3 million. If everybody only applies for 1 million, which is unlikely, it could be as many as 42, which is still not as many tribes are eligible for this grant. If everybody has kind of a ranging amount depending on what they actually need, around 20 could be awarded. So we think it's probably going to be sliding. It could be only 14. So that's why there's been some metrics around the application. And then are legal expenses allowed? BI has suspended funding for now, and our tribal court and Hearth Act Section 17 are being worked out. Legal expenses for, well, it'll depend on what the application is for. And so the impact grant is not intended to provide funding for programs or for technical experts unless it's part of a fuller package that would be a full funding thing. So like I could see where contracting expenses with experts could be part of a bigger process for a project to be fully funded, given that legal expertise is typically required when you're doing several resolutions and securing outside contractors. And so I think it wouldn't not be allowed necessarily, but I think it would have to be in the context of a full kind of shovel-ready project. So again, I think not disallowed, but if the entire application is for legal expenses, then that's probably not going to be something that's kind of within the scope of this impact grant. And sorry, I missed a question. There was a panel discussion at a previous meeting about annual tribal audits being in compliance. Is this still going to be a requirement? For the purposes of this grant, we're going to look just at compliance within the grant itself. And so in terms of demonstration of, past success, the four corners of the program are kind of what this panel is looking at. Not necessarily looking at kind of outside of this, because I think the program is intended to be like an alternate funding source for folks who potentially have had issues in the past and have issues securing additional funding. I will say it would be my preference and the preference of the panel if you're not hiding things, because explaining why there may have been non-compliance in the past on other projects can be really helpful for the panel to understand, because despite being part of looking only at the four corners of the grant, people will have an awareness of things that might have happened in the past. So I would say that being candid about how you've overcome previous challenges, if you've had previous challenges, is super helpful, especially if it's like, hey, we had a previous council or we had a previous member of the staff who, we're not trying to throw people under the bus, obviously, and this is stuff that can be discussed in closed session with the panel. But explaining why there may be some weirdness in the past is super helpful for the panel to understand whether there's kind of a different tone or a different accountability at the tribal level at this point. Okay. Seeing no more questions kind of trickling in the chat, I'm going to move on to the actual application itself. And again, the presentation I just posted will be posted online. The full recording will also be available if there's anything that you missed or anything that I said that was confusing and you just want to play back. And then these full grant guidelines, I'm going to double check if I have the same typos in those, but they are available as I showed you on the website already, but maybe updated if I find, oh, there is the same typo. So we'll update it and repost it. Okay, so I'm going to go then and share my screen again. Okay. So we're back at the TNGF landing page. As I mentioned, you can find you can find the impact grant here at tngf.ca.gov/impact_grant.html. And you can find those grant guidelines here. If you click apply here, it'll take you to SurveyMonkey. Each of you should have an account already from previous grants. But you should be able to find the impact grant on your SurveyMonkey. In order to be considered kind of fully complete for the panel's consideration, you will need an authorizing resolution. If you go on publications on the TNGF website and go down to sample tribal resolution, that is a basic sample tribal resolution. This is for the equal distribution grant, so obviously don't just cut and paste this. I think a little bit more editing would need to be done for the impact grant. But what you'll want to do is have a resolution that authorizes the specific person submitting the application to submit that application. And sometimes that changes, or there's a couple people you've authorized. We just need, for the panel's purposes, for the person that you're authorizing. See this part, the tribe authorizes authorized parties to submit, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a name. It could also be our grant administrator. It's helpful if we have a name, or if you put that somewhere else so that we know that that's the right person. To submit a grant application for the TNGF on behalf of the tribe. And we ask this mostly because we've had times in the past where a council member will submit an application, and then the chairman will submit an application for the same tribe, and it's the state doesn't want to be mediating between a council member and the tribal chair. So it's much cleaner for the panel to just have that authorization within the resolution. And that the tribe authorizes the submission of that application for the purpose that you're applying for the impact grant. So there is a sample, as I mentioned, on the website of what we look for when we're seeing whether it's actually authorized. Please remember to have a fully certified resolution that is signed and has all your votes in there. We just want to make sure that for the panel's purposes that everything is fully legal and on board with the tribe. But anyway, so you'll have your eligibility, you'll select your tribe from the list. And then you'll see all the criteria. And then you'll confirm the grant acceptance terms. And again, the name that's confirming should either be your chairman or the person who's authorized to submit. I think for purposes of the grant fund, it's cleaner if you've got it, whoever was authorized, so we don't have to go back and check and make sure that, you know, the person that submitted is the actual person that should be. So sometimes it's good to say your chairman or the person who's also working on it and staffing it. Okay. Oh, that's the wrong thing. Okay, so the application form itself, you'll put your name, the authorized contact information, and again, must match the tribal resolution. We can't emphasize that enough. And then the best way to contact you, and this is helpful for Erica and for CGCC staff, to be able to reach out to you if there are any questions about the application as we're in that cure period. And then whether you're a non-gaming or limited gaming tribe. Oh, it looks like I have to answer all these things before we can go. Okay. Text should be an option, but one second. Oh, it's just the email. You all know my email anyway, so this is not a problem. Okay. So on the application form, you'll see all those funding criteria. You'll put the amount requested. We're gonna request 1 million right now. Project name, impact project, and this is a great project. So put your summary here, and then if you have documents, then we encourage you to upload all your documents. That's really helpful. In addition to the summary, your timeline, that's helpful for the panel to know. 3 years, that's not a good timeline, just so you know. I think breaking it out into, once funding is secured, we're going to be entering into this contract. We've already identified our contractor, blah, blah, blah. Your community impact is where you'll talk about the activities and outcomes your tribe wants to achieve from the funding and how you'll track that project success. Your long-term strategies for funding the project, that's how they're going to determine whether it's a sustainable project. And so, we're going to say, the tribe has a set aside within its revenue structure where it's committed to funding beyond the grant period. And here's our revenue structure. Project administration, our administrator is going to do it. Now you know why there's so many typos, is because I am all over the place today. And then additional funding. We actually have another grant, and we were going to self-fund, but actually this is a better thing for us because it allows for us to do something different. And so we'll say that we have the giant grant from someone else. And apparently this isn't good enough because we don't have the budget summary, which is great. We need a budget summary. So if you need a budget summary, you can look at the TNGF website, and we'll just download this so we can upload it. And this is basically what the panel wants to see. I think especially with this project, you're going to want to have some detail there, because again, that will just show how feasible it is for you. So we will upload that and continue. Do we have any grants that are currently open? No. Are we in compliance? Yes. And that means they've all been closed within the designated performance period, or you're under an approved extension. These are all just for the panel to understand whether you have extensions, if you're approved, and if any of this is actually no, and mark as complete. Okay, I think that's it. So those are all the questions that you need to ask or that you need to answer for your application to be complete. At any point during the initial, I'm going to stop sharing. But at any point during that initial application period, you can go back in and edit your application. We encourage you not to submit it until it's complete, but don't forget to submit it. And then we will ask you to go back in and amend things if we see that there are anything outstanding. So let's say you went through and you submitted everything, and then your project budget looks a little light, like it looks like just 1 million for construction. That is probably not going to be enough detail for the panel. And I think they'll want to see things like, we got a quote, this is what it looks like, and that's why we like our budget justification. I'm going to turn back to the questions. Loretta or Erica, is there anything that I am missing right now that we should make sure folks know about?
No, I think you covered everything. I think the only thing I want to touch on is the resolution. If we have a new contact at any point, if you guys can submit an updated resolution. I find that we have one contact, and then 2 months later, someone else will contact And before I can release any information, I have to get an updated resolution.
Thanks, Erica. And again, all of this is just because we want to make sure that your tribe has an authorized person speaking on its behalf. It's not to make your lives harder. It's just that we know sometimes there can be a left-hand, right-hand situation where potentially one department has applied on the tribe's behalf, but the tribe didn't quite know about it. And we want to just make sure that the tribe, as the governing body and the elected body of your people, is the actual applicant, and that you're fully supporting whatever application is coming through. To confirm, are renewable energy projects and microgrids allowable? Absolutely. As long as they're, meet the criteria, they should be allowable. And as long as, again, they kind of fit within the tribe's plans, definitely allowable. If constructing a behavioral health building, could the tribe add salaries for a year to the project as the tribe secures additional funding? I think just as a baseline, if the tribe is seeking to secure additional funding that's not identified yet, that would make it not an eligible project. And so if the salaries for a year are contemplated based on like actual funding that is identified, that is typical, like, I think it's got to be like reasonably foreseeable and feasible that that additional funding is secured and identified, versus we're going to build a thing and then we're going to figure it out later. I think the panel for this, for the purposes of competitiveness and also just the funding exclusions, that future funding should be identified so that they can, or else the application would not be an eligible application. Are we able to submit for multiple projects? Not at this time. Well, let me back up. If you have an application that identifies multiple projects that are within the 1 to 3 million, and they're all within one plan for the tribe, I don't think that would be, I think that would probably be fine as long as there is a cohesive narrative about how it's like one part of one strategic plan, for example. And I could see there being a situation where you are building a, let's say, worker housing on reservation for your enterprises that are not gaming. And in that project is included, wastewater treatment, is included roads, is included, like all of that's going to be way more than 1 to 3 million. But I could see how there could be multiple discrete projects that are actually part of a bigger plan. And as long as then documents support that, then that would be acceptable. But you could not submit, let's say, 3 different projects for the tribe adding like out with 3 different applications adding up to 1 to 3 million. I think to the panel, if they can't see a common thread, we'll see what it is if you're applying for 3 different projects that have no relation, because you're trying to get to the 3 million. Because really, I think everybody's kind of on the panel is hoping that, and I'm hoping that also, just given again that there's limited funding, and even in like best case scenario where, everybody submits 1 million, not every tribe would be able to get funding. That you all use a little bit of prudence here about the funding available so that as many folks as possible can secure that funding. So again, that's kind of a wishy-washy way of saying if it's feasibly related as being kind of one plan, yes, submit multiple projects. If it's something where it just is completely disjointed and it looks like 3 different applications, then that's probably not going to be something that they'll consider. And probably within that cure period, we'll ask you to amend it to reflect one cohesive project. So I think the common theme here is that projects should be self-sustaining. They should be for self-determination, or economic or community development for the tribe. And again, really with that self-determination lens. So when someone's asking about, green energy, like that, that is tribal, like energy sovereignty, great. And they should not be relying on unreliable future or contingent funding sources. And when I say contingent, I don't mean like leveraged funding where you just need the million to hold in the bank. I mean, like, if we get this, we might be able to get something else. Like, again, I think the guiding light here is that the panel would like to fund as many viable projects as possible. And so again, does not want, necessarily to have funding get held up in a place of uncertainty where 3 years in, it turns out that there wasn't really a plan and another tribe could have actually used that funding for something that could get. Projects cannot be for less than 1 million. So that's the point of this. There will be another equal distribution grant round that will probably happen in the next few months. So I would say that if you have a project for less than 1 million, I would think about using the equal distribution for that because that's currently at 600,000. But the purpose of this fund is specifically for those bigger projects that tribes have not been able to fund with other funding sources and that could really use an infusion of in the $1 million range. And ideally in future, probably more funding, given that we know how much everything costs in California. So the 1 to 3 million is kind of the baby steps in to see kind of what's effective, whether adjustments need to be made. But really I think this fund is designed to be for more kind of costlier projects. Panel discussed shovel-ready projects. So it's not a requirement for funding, but when we talk about shovel-ready, everything that you submit in your application should demonstrate that this project is pretty much ready to go, or that all of the elements needed for it to be successful are contemplated for. So like, if your project is not, like, let's say you're looking to develop your land, but no environmental studies have been done, no feasibility studies have been done. So there's not really kind of that groundwork laid, then that would probably be a project that's not ripe for this fund. And so I would say making sure that your projects are relatively like ready to go is going to be something that the panel is going to be looking at. And again, I think it's that piece of if they fund a project that includes feasibility and environmental studies in it, which I think that was the whole reason they created the capacity building grant, was because they heard from all of you that you all need capacity to be even ready to apply for something like an impact grant. If there's still outstanding things like that, where potentially those studies could show that actually it's not feasible to do a project in this way, or that it's actually the cost would be some sort of astronomical number, that would make it effectively unfeasible to do anything. I think for purposes of the panel, having kind of all of that taken care of is what's going to make a project viable or not. And so I think for purposes of this, they're looking for projects that if you got the funding, you could start them tomorrow, basically. And we know that there are a couple out there that they wanted to start them yesterday. And so we apologize for the delay on the release of this funding. But I think that's really what they're looking to be funding is, again, things where you're pretty much ready to go. You just need an infusion of capital to do it. And you may not have been able to find different funding sources for that, or you have, but you just need a little bit more. And I think that's what they're ultimately looking to be funding. Any other questions at this time? Okay, looks like maybe no more questions at this time.
I'm
If you
sorry.
do,
I'm,
yeah,
I'm
go.
sorry. Someone came in my office right when you were talking. So the cohesive plan, because this is Pamela Matz from Hoopa. We have like several plans. Like we have the Hoopa 4 project, and that includes like 4 little sites into one project. And so I'm just trying to think, there's so many things being thrown at me. Well, we want to do this and we want to do that and we want to do this. And I'm thinking they're thinking we can do several different type plans. So I heard you say that it has to be cohesive, like maybe it's all a big thing for Hoopa that represents an economic growth, or tourism, or like even food security, things like that. Are those?
Yeah, so let's say, for example, that you had like, and it's got to be demonstrated within the application. So I'm not, I think don't make this up if it doesn't already exist. But
Yeah.
like, let's say that the tribe has an like a 5-year economic development plan. And
Mhm.
there's multiple projects within that plan. Like that to me looks like one cohesive plan that could be within one application. And so let's say it's like a cultural tourism plan and it says like, hey, we'd like to build out elk viewing stations. We'd like to purchase like these, we'd like to purchase storage facilities. We're, building out trails. Like those are all different things, but
Mhm.
they're all part of a bigger plan to catalyze a cultural tourism industry. And if it looks like a fully fleshed out plan where all of those elements complement each other, then I think that would be acceptable as like one project.
Okay.
But
So
I
like,
think for purposes of the tribe, making sure that they're thinking about it in that way in terms of like, this isn't just one big, it's like the equal distribution is like, that's kind of an all over the place. You can do whatever you want, like add a bunch of different things. This one I think is more about like focusing tribes on like big impact projects for their communities, either community or economic development, or infrastructure. So like, I don't know. It's hard to see without seeing details, but I think if you can focus folks from your tribe on thinking about it more as like it's got to be a cohesive plan versus like we have 20 things we want to do. Like I think it's gonna work better for the panel in their consideration to understand where you're going with it if it looks like it's part of like there's a through line with the plan.
yeah. So with the Hoopa 4 project, which we are doing, and it's a big it's a big project. We didn't have enough money to do everything, and what it entails is like fixing our campground, fixing our park and our rodeo grounds, and then our NF, which is neighborhood facilities for recreation. Um, I'm thinking maybe that we would put the money to complete that project, but it's not it can be economic growth and stuff, but it can be a lot of things because we have basketball tournaments and we have baseball tournaments and we have rodeos and things like that. So it could be tourism, it could be economic development. So I'm just
Well, and so all of those things are acceptable under the grant fund. And so I think like when we talk about sustainable, it's just, is there a plan for this to continue in the future? Or
Yeah.
is it going to be kind of in disrepair and then there's gonna, like, so I think the idea that there's like community gatherings, that the tribe actually like will fund certain things, that there are some things that get funded by the outside, or there could be economic, like, I think all of that would be relevant for the panel's consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm gonna clean up some of these documents because I found my 2 typos, and then those will get the impact grant ones you won't even notice, but they'll get updated on the website, and then we'll post the PowerPoint for you all to read through on your own time as well, which are the same, but might be a better format for some folks, or if you're trying to present to your to the tribal leaders in your community or to your general counsel who may be interested in some of this stuff. And then we will also post the recording of this on the TNGF website. Erica will send out an email to those materials once they're ready. And Loretta will add it to our Friday email to tribal leaders in case they're interested in taking a look as well. If you have any outstanding questions, please reach out to Erica at that tribal consultation email, and we will endeavor to answer them as quickly as possible. But again, we all just want you all to be successful on this. So again, there's no stupid questions here. So just please keep asking them as they come up. Again, we want you to be in a position where you're submitting some really cool stuff for your communities. And I think the panel is looking forward to seeing your applications. So good luck, everybody. And hopefully this was helpful, and we'll make those materials available. Erica, did you want to add something?
I did. So I've been getting a few emails. If you have not received an email from me and you want to be added to our contact list, just send me an email and let me know what tribe you're associated with, and I will get you added.
Great. Well, thank you all. Hope you have a restful weekend, and we will see you all later. Take care.